Good morning. Hello, my name is David Newton, and I'd like to share my paintings with you in the Toynton Show. Please come in. The way this show came to pass is, in and of itself, quite a blessing, because I didn't do this. My wife was alert to hearing about this opportunity because of her involvement with Greeley's Philharmonic Orchestra, and they were planning to do a presentation of Gustav Holsts' The Planets, and Gail knew I loved the planets and painted them, and so she just said that my husband could show his space art at the same time, and the whole thing came from that. And that set it in motion, but when I realized that they were going to allow me to use this beautiful space, I thought, the work that I have isn't worthy of that. So, and I also had only painted 5 of the 8 planets that were going to be presented. It's so beautiful. Holsts' music, which I've been familiar with for many years, stirred up in me through the opportunity of this show, the challenge to paint planets I have never painted before. I've painted Mars before. Mars is a very attractive planet in various ways. Holst wasn't far wrong when he was associating Mars with war, because though Mars is a real planet that we could walk on, and many people are being stirred up to actually be there on it and even colonize it. I call this painting the New Everest because 2 generations ago, people just couldn't imagine standing on top of Mount Everest. But some very brave people tried, some of them died, and some of them made it. And now, this year, there's this line of people waiting to get up to the top. Unfortunately, several people died this year, so that's all in jeopardy. People have already signed up to go to Mars, because it's calling us out. It isn't just calling us off the Earth, but it's calling us into the unknown, and it's calling out some of the best qualities of human character. Nobody gets into space without teamwork, and people have to work together, some of them in the limelight, and most of them behind the scenes. People don't even know the names of the bulk of the people that got a few astronauts to the moon. They're just lost in history. It reminds me so much about the Bible. So many people that really supported the heroes of the Bible are forgotten, and we know only a few of the names. We only know a few of the names of the first people that got to the top of Mount Everest, and we know a few of the names. Most people don't even know all of the names of the people that walked on the moon. But Mars is doing that right now. Mars is being that challenge. Mars says, you can't do this, and some brave people are saying, oh yes, we can. I don't know at what cost we might get there. It will be costing lives, and it will cost a lot of money. But something gets stirred up in the human adventure spirit that is really potent. It can carry us into our search for God. It can carry us into our desire to explore Mars. Without that, mankind wouldn't be what it is. It gets us into trouble, but it calls forth some of the most honorable, noble, heroic things that we can do. So Mars is very red. When I paint it, sometimes I can hardly. I don't want to paint it for a certain place, because not very many places could handle its intensity. There is something warlike about the color red, of course, blood, and Mars just oozes that. But it's so interesting. If you were standing on Mars, the sky would be pink, a color that we associate with peace and gentleness. But from a distance, Mars is certainly strong, and I hope this painting captures that. Let's go over to these other paintings. Now, this next group of paintings is of Earth. Holst didn't compose for Earth because there are so many musical compositions that were about Earth already. But I love Earth, especially from the moon. This particular image is one of the few of my space paintings where we're actually standing on the other body. These are some of the highest mountains on the moon, and one of the last Apollo teams landed here. They saved it for the end because it's a much more difficult technical landing spot, but they did want to explore some of what they could only find in the mountains of the moon. So this is, I love the drama of this, is this crater just hanging off in the right-hand foreground, which is a deep crater. And here we are looking at our beautiful home planet, which really moved most of the Apollo astronauts beyond words. So anyway, this painting kind of captures that. This one here is of Earth, and it is actually a painting looking down on the Himalayas. I didn't paint Everest specifically, but it's down in here someplace, looking off to the south at India. So this painting is a reference to the old Everest that used to be so challenging. And what I like about this painting is that, you know, if you're at the foot of Mount Everest looking up at it, it's just indomitable. How could anybody do that? But looking down, it's about as flat as the rest of the Earth. I've heard that if you looked at an egg as if it was Earth, the texture of an eggshell is more pronounced than the actual geographic features, even including the deepest ocean trenches. The surface of the Earth is very flat, and this painting shows that. And then these three paintings over here are also of Earth and Moon. This one pays tribute to the Voyager space vehicles that have explored all of the outer planets and some of the inner planets. And I really love to acknowledge the science and the technology, the engineering that allows us to see the planets, which we're going to be looking at more later. So this painting pays tribute to that. This particular painting over here is one of the most quiet paintings in the show, except for the title. So I want to share with you the title, because that takes what's mundane and makes it profound, and so much of life is like that. We just pass by what we've already decided is mundane, when really it's profound. A flower is profound. An insect is profound. Our little Earth and Moon are profound, and one of the reasons that I like it is because, I've titled this painting Cradle, because Earth is a cradle. You could say Earth is a cradle of civilization. All of the history that we know of, and all of the history we don't know of, the Egyptians, the Europeans, the Asians, all of us have lived, our whole societies, our families were born on this little planet. But here's this other thing. The Lord, the King of the universe, was born on this little planet, and in a cradle, in a manger, in such a humble way. So the God who created all of this chose this place as his birthplace, and the whole rest of that story is another story. But it's, to me, it really kicks up the majesty of this one planet, the one we live on. And so I wanted to draw people's attention to just the beauty of that, just the poetic beauty of us being born on the same planet in similar time as our Lord was born. What a privilege. So now we're in the biggest room of the show with some of the biggest paintings, and here we are at the biggest entity in our solar system. I'm standing in front of a painting that looks like it's a painting of the sun, but it's really a painting of Mercury. I hadn't ever painted Mercury before this opportunity came to paint for Gustav Holsts The Planets. I, like a lot of people interested in the planets, kind of discount Mercury as just a large moon that happens to orbit the sun. But it's not true. It's a true planet. Mercury has a metallic core, and it has even a very fine atmosphere. It fits all of the criteria of a planet, and it is actually very interesting. And presently, for the first time in history, we have some spacecraft exploring Mercury, and we're learning some very fascinating things about it. It still is quite small, just a little larger than our moon, and it's very close to the sun, which entirely defines it, because it is seared by the sun's radiation. This painting shows Mercury still a long ways off. I estimate it's approximately 100,000 miles away. The sun behind it is 36 million miles away, which only kicks up its size all the more. The sun is just horrendously powerful, which is good because we use, this planet has life through the energy flowing from the sun, and we're still in these days. We're discovering quite a bit more about the sun with telescopes designed to see beyond human eye capacity. We can look at the sun in so many different ways now, and we're learning some of how it really works. It takes a long time for the nuclear forces to bubble up from within the sun, and the surface of the sun is always changing, and every 11 years it goes through phases, so that sometimes it's all the more dangerous and all the more benign, and the sun activities, storms on the sun affect our technology in ways we're just beginning to discover. Storms on the sun can shut down whole power grids overnight. The radiation can reach Earth. Just a fragment of the radiation that is released every hour from the sun can shut down civilization in a large geographic area, just almost at a whim. And we're learning to be humble as we develop some of our electronic gadgetry, which is very subject to the random energy releases from the sun. So we are blessed by the sun beyond measure, and we are in some ways threatened by the sun. Even though it's 93 million miles away from us, it still has enough energy to push us around, and that's good. But it is just a star. It's in many ways an ordinary star at the smaller end of the whole spectrum of stars. There are stars nearby in our galaxy that are as much bigger than our sun as the sun is from Mercury. There are gigantic stars just out there being what God made them to be, and they're just majestic. Adjacent to this painting are these scriptures, which I want to, in some way, thank the city of Greeley for allowing to be hung. I have seen professional people who are in charge of this public space be very careful about the presentation of scriptures. We have quotes from other people who write, Lord Byron, various people, Longfellow, and it's okay to have poetry in this space as a part of the show. But because people are careful with the Bible, I had to get permission from 2 levels up in the bureaucracy to be able to do this. There are various reasons for that being true, but the one that I choose to receive is that even people who aren't reverencing the Bible, who don't necessarily believe it's the Word of God, sense that it has that much power that they have to be careful with its display. To me, that's a direct or an oblique tribute to the power that the Bible has, even in the United States at this time, that people are careful with it. But here it is, these potent scriptures about the heavens declaring the glory of God. One of the other titles for this whole show that I was thinking of is Lift Up Your Eyes, which is a quote from the Bible. If we just do that, we arrive at this state of natural, great humility and awe, so that we just want to worship God. If we'll just stop and look up at the sun and the moon and the stars, we can see Jupiter at night. Tonight we could go out and see it, but we don't really realize what Jupiter is until we study it. And some of the other paintings that we'll get to begin to unfold our current understanding of the majesty of Jupiter. But far bigger than Jupiter is the Sun, and this is a painting of that and Mercury. One little curious feature of this particular painting, it's just a technical thing, and it does address composition, but it's also very interesting to me about how our eyes can lie to us and we believe them. So I know, and I'd have to get out a measuring tape to prove this, but this little black spot, which is the backside of Mercury, is truly in the center of the canvas. Even after you know that, it's hard to make your mind believe that, because I purposely put the Sun above and to the right, actually to the left, but the real bottom of the painting is this. So I'll just say that the Sun is purposefully off-center, and I did that to make it compositionally more dynamic. I didn't really know that it would cause this curious tension between Mercury being in the center and the rest of the painting, but it does that, and I'll just restate that even when you know you're dealing with a lie, it's very hard to overrule that if the lie is convincing enough, which certainly addresses my sin nature, because I know some of my tendencies to believe things that aren't true about me in the eyes of God, and yet I wake up in the day and I do the same thing over again. So as long as I'm around this painting, I will have to make myself believe that this is the center of the canvas. My part of the logical part of my mind knows it, but the illogical part of my mind that kind of governs a lot of my behavior just walks away from that truth. After I had done this was my desire to do Mercury. I thought, yep, I've done Mercury, but I thought later, this was in the vision of my 9 paintings that I wanted to do. But as this one was done and sitting there, actually I was using this painting to block a window that was casting too much light in the room. So it was but I knew it was there, and I just I kind of started feeling guilty. I thought, that's too cheating. You can't call a 3/8 inch black spot a painting of a planet. So I thought, there's more to Mercury than that, because I know it's a beautiful, there's such a beautiful texture in the battered surface of this planet. So I thought, all right, David, if you have time, if God gives you time, and that would seem like miraculous at that point in time, do Mercury again. And I thought, okay, what is distinctive about Mercury? And I knew that just the planet isn't particularly distinctive. Our moon and many other moons look quite a bit like it as texture, battered by meteorites and intense radiation. The distinctive thing about Mercury is that it is the innermost planet, and if you're on the sunlit side, you would look out at all of the other planets in their full phase. From Earth, 2 of the planets have a crescent phase like our moon. The inner planets, Mercury and Venus. And you can get a hint of crescent on even Jupiter and some of the outer planets from Earth. But only from Mercury would all of them always have to be full. And then, just this percolated up from my memory, this phrase, grand alignment, which is a very tantalizing phrase. So I just remembered what that was, and then I Googled it, and I thought, oh yes, and so nobody knows statistically if it's ever really happened, but everybody agrees mathematically it could happen that the planets would align on the same side of the Sun at the same time. And so I thought, well, I'm not a photographer, I'm a painter. I can make it happen. So in this painting, here's Mercury with the Sun behind us, and here's Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. I know that these planets couldn't be visible from Mercury with the naked eye, but I thought if I can make them be on the same side of the planet all at once, I can also make them visible beyond the human eye. We're looking to God's eyes at this very rare experience. It did happen that in the 80s, when they launched the Voyager, the 4 outer planets were on the same side of the planet at the same time, which only happens once in 175 years. That's a lot of years, but I'm like, look, all of a sudden, when that was happening, some courageous scientists thought, let's take advantage of that. And they hustled and they got it together to develop the concept and the funding for Voyager, so that only one of the Voyagers, of the two that were launched, made it to all 4 planets. One beautiful thing that the engineers did, it just shows how crazy engineers can be. They got it in their head to target one of the Voyagers to go through the Cassini division in the rings of Saturn. That's incredible. That's like aiming a bow at a target 10 miles away and shooting it and having it go through the bullseye. Maybe even another arrow splitting the first arrow. That's how technically difficult it was to have that spacecraft. And they didn't know what would happen. Even if they hit it, they thought it might get destroyed by some rock fragment. But it went right through those Cassini rings. But they also knew that if they did that, the gravity of Saturn would throw it up out of the top of the solar system, and it wouldn't do any more work. It would just be lost to any future. But they wanted so bad to do it that that's what they did. The other Voyager, they kept on track to visit the outer planets, Neptune and Uranus. And so just one of them got to all 4 of them. But it was possible because they were near each other, relatively near each other, at that one point in history in the 70s and 80s and 90s, so that they could pull that off as a feat. All right, I'd like to introduce now one of those planets that Voyager 2 got to look at, and this is Neptune. Neptune is presently the outermost planet. It's so far from the Sun that it's almost unbelievable. The Sun is quite a large star, but merely a star from Neptune. Neptune is like 3 billion miles from the Sun. Each planet out from the Sun is approximately twice as far out as the one previous in. So each time you go out exponentially, the planets get doubly far away. That's really powerful. So Neptune, one reason Neptune is blue is because of the chemical composition in the atmosphere. But another reason is it gets so little sunlight. I've heard one scientist describe the lighting on Neptune would be like you were in a dim cathedral on a cloudy day, sitting there. That's the brightest the sunlight ever gets, that far out from the Sun. But another thing I love about Neptune is it stirs up something in human beings because we're so used to blue skies. So a lot of people really bond with Neptune. Just to see a whole planet that's blue is really wonderful. This planet, both of these paintings show this vast storm that's been underway on the planet Neptune for quite a while. It's similar in appearance to the Great Red Spot on Jupiter, which we'll be getting to in a little while. But one really fascinating thing about Neptune is one of its major moons. So as fascinating as the outer planets are with the Voyager flybys, we didn't get nearly as close to the planets, and we don't know as much about the planets as we got to some of the moons. And one of the moons we got very close to with Voyager was the large moon Triton of Neptune. And Triton is, as far as we can measure and know, the coldest natural body in our solar system. The temperatures on Triton are unbelievably cold, an example of which is some of the volcanic activity that is taking place on the surface of Triton is rock spewing up from underneath in this volcanic way that's comprised of the elements that we breathe on Earth. On Earth, the elements are gas, and on Triton, it's so cold that they are solid or volcanic rock. And to imagine that environment that's been there all this time doing what it does with such similar components as we know, but in such a different form, it just makes them all very fantastic. one reason Triton is volcanically active is because the orbit of Neptune is weird, and something happened to churn up gravitationally both Neptune and its moons. So just gravity is tearing at the forces within Triton, which is causing the heat to make this volcanic activity. The cold environment out there would have shut it down. So the scientists were looking for, why is it happening that there is volcanic activity on this very cold moon? And they're not positive yet, but that's their line of thinking. And that does seem to be sufficient to explain why volcanic activities are happening on this particular moon. There are other moons of other planets where volcanoes exist, which we didn't know before the Voyagers. It's just hard to believe. But this is one of them. And it's a very peculiar surface that's been produced by these geologic activities. But that's what this painting is meant to capture. Well, this corner of the gallery contains several paintings, some of which I may never paint again. Venus, for instance. I'm glad I painted it, but Venus is hard to paint because I've actually used artistic license here somewhat, because really, even from very near the surface of Venus, we can't see what's going on because it's an almost impenetrable haze. It's very good at reflecting light, which is why Venus is so beautiful from Earth as the morning and evening star. But Venus isn't really that interesting to me. It's too hostile, and it doesn't speak to me the way some of the other planets do. Jupiter, on the other hand, has spoken to me for a long time. I love Jupiter. Everything about Jupiter, including its Roman name, is majestic, powerful. Jupiter has more than twice the mass of all the rest of the planets put together. It's huge, and one of the things I wanted to convey in my paintings about Jupiter is how big it is. A very famous feature of Jupiter, the Great Red Spot, has been seen for hundreds of years. Galileo was one of the first to have seen it through his telescope, in addition to some of the larger moons that you can see through a small telescope. But I've learned, I just hadn't thought of it, but every time I paint Jupiter, I paint the Great Red Spot. It's just so compelling. This particular painting, I very much want to talk to you about. I personally feel that this is the best painting I've ever done, for some obscure reasons. The biggest reason is because nobody has ever gotten close enough to this planet to photograph this scene. God has been putting this on me for many years. I've been grasping, reaching into my mind, what would it look like? And the more I learn about it from successful missions and viewings and scientific thought, the more I just am compelled. What is it? What is it? What would it look like? Jupiter is so threatening, so dangerous. The radiation and electronic field around Jupiter are terrible. It's enough to cause some of its innermost moons to be volcanically active. It's just tearing apart these moons, churning them up, and they're hundreds of thousands of miles away from Jupiter. Jupiter leaves in its wake this tail of electromagnetic energy that it meets again as it comes back around the other side of the sun. There's just so much going on around Jupiter that's not visual or audio, and I wanted to capture that in these paintings. This painting was really hard for me to paint in some ways, but I was so excited. I painted this horizon early on 6 times before it started having some of the look of real clouds, like thousands of miles away. You could look in a straight line across the cloud tops of Jupiter and see till your eye gives out. You can see like 25,000 miles of clouds, and what would that look like? I had to kind of grasp for that. And then as I got closer and closer, foregrounds are easy enough to paint. Backgrounds are easy enough to paint. the horizon, but what's really hard is the middle ground. To paint one tree is okay, to paint a mountain with 1,000,000 trees is okay, but to paint a distant forest with thousands of trees is really hard, because you have to get a sense for the thousands of real individual trees. The whole bottom of this is middle ground. There are clouds in rivers of clouds so vast that it's really hard to grasp. So I painted this area 20 times. It was coming and going and ebbing and flowing. I was trying to get a sense of light shining through the clouds. I was trying so many things, but I just was reaching farther and farther. And I felt sometimes I was losing it, and sometimes it's coming back. And then it was different than I had envisioned. I thought, well, that's okay, that's better. And I just wrestled with this. This is the painting that I've done in my whole life that's most me. It's most me stepping out into something that I couldn't see ahead of time. And it isn't just what my eyes might see, it's this feeling of awe and majesty, just the vastness of the scene. One of the things I've realized is that the different, from space, the different colors that are between these red and white and gray areas, it isn't because the chemicals are black, it's because light is beginning to fail. It's getting down so far into these canyons of cloud that light no longer goes with you. So in this area, for instance, this canyon of clouds is so deep we can't even imagine it. It's like 10,000 feet down, or miles down. You just can't see the bottom of it. And just as I was calculating, this image up here is an image of Earth to scale. Like 3 Earths would fit within this one cyclonic storm that's been going on Jupiter for 400 years or more. And the gap between this group of clouds and this group of clouds is wide enough that you could take Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and Nebraska, put them together as a bridge, and it would barely make it across there. Jupiter is so big. Even after having painted it and thought about it, I still can't quite wrap my mind about it, around it. So, but it's also so beautiful. Just the churning eddies and shapes. You know, I love to look at a muddy river as it's flowing in a flood stage, because all of these beautiful patterns, they're all around us. Bubbles have similar colors and just the sheen of a bubble. These shapes are all around us, just fluid dynamics. And God, the Bible talks about the wind and how that's a metaphor for the way the Spirit works, just in these waves of eddies and pools. Sometimes when I get into sin, I think I'm just stuck in this endlessly circling eddy of something that's too small, and I want to break out of that. Well, some of that is going on in a different way on these vast planets, and I'm just mesmerized by the shapes of Jupiter. I've seen motion picture images that some of our spacecraft have sent us from Jupiter, and you can actually see the clouds turning. They're very dynamic. The red spot stays there in a similar place on the latitude of the planet, but it changes color, it gets darker and lighter. Other red spots have formed, and they say, oh, well, we have a second red spot, but then after a few years it goes away. They're just a little smaller than this one, so what is it about this one that makes it so distinctive and lasting? God knows, and I don't. A couple of years ago, a very large meteor was known to be headed at Jupiter, and so we had the capacity to study it. And before it got to Jupiter, it broke up into, I think, 9 different pieces, and they thought, oh, what will happen? And maybe it'll make a new red spot, because it was big enough. If it would have hit Earth, it would have done terrible devastation. And they were watching it, and it actually hit on the night side, the distant side of Jupiter, so they couldn't actually see the impact. But they saw when Jupiter rotated enough to come back around, they thought, what are we going to see? Are we going to see terrible destruction? It was a little blip that lasted a few weeks, and then it went away. So something is causing this massive storm, something that we may never really fully understand, but it's there. It's saying, majesty, glory, wonder. It's saying some song from God to us that I just am enthralled with, and I try to capture it in these paintings of Jupiter. So I would like to talk a little bit about Uranus. I've never painted Uranus before. It's just an oversight. There are not nearly as many good photographs of Uranus as the other planets, but it is a fascinating planet. There are a number of mysterious things about Uranus. One of them is, some of them are about its moons, and we know more about the moons of Uranus than we do about the planet itself. One very distinctive thing about Uranus is that it's on its side as it goes around the sun. The North Pole and the South Pole of Uranus are where our equator would be. And people are asking themselves, how could that develop? Because it does not fit normal planetary science, but it is, and people are pondering that through. Which brings about some interesting visuals on the surface. So I've just scratched the surface of the planet itself. I would love to paint it again. It's a very eerie and wonderful set of colors as well. But this moon of Uranus is remarkable. It's not a particularly large moon, but it is big enough to be truly spherical, but barely in a way, because it's theorized that the moon has been broken apart and reassembled through gravity several times, and I tried to capture here on the surface of Miranda, this moon. There is a vertical cliff that's 12 miles down from top to bottom, which is about twice the height of Mount Everest from sea level. It's almost unbelievable to imagine looking down from the top of that. It's pretty frightening. And so I tried to capture that here. One thing though, if you jumped because of the low gravitation, you wouldn't even get hurt. So I think that saves me from getting frightened by thinking about that vertical cliff. So in this area, there are some of my favorite things about the planets, and some of the things that I've enjoyed, but I may never get back to. I think that as long as I have the privilege of painting, I'm going to do some more and more exploration of Jupiter. I can just tell it has a pull on me. I don't even know why, but if I can, I will revisit the mysteries of Jupiter. I had been experimenting with an oil medium that was for something else, and I thought, wait a minute, this might work. I'd never glazed with a lighter glaze. I'd always glazed with a darker glaze. Mm-hmm. And I thought, maybe I can glaze with a lighter glaze. And that doesn't work in watercolor, but I thought, maybe it'll work in oil. So I tried it, and it worked. And I thought, I would have to do it 2 or 3 times to get it to the place I wanted. But the first time, it worked. I thought, Lord, that's you. Thank you. Thank you. And then I thought, I just can't believe it. I would look at it, and I said, this can't be done. And I'd look at it, it is done. I'm not ready to be done. I had a big fight to come up, but it was done. And he said, be at peace, move on. And so I did. I had this other painting, Saturn, that I had started. I thought, it's big, I got to get going. Saturn's hard, all those rings, and what I want to do is just too hard. So I got a lot of color going, got a composition going, and then I thought, I don't know how to finish this. So I just went on to other things, and the technique that I developed for Venus, I was thinking, wait a minute, that might work with Saturn. So I didn't know how to do the rings. I didn't know how to do a number of really important features of Saturn that big. Uh-huh. But by the time I needed to do it, I had learned the technique to do it.
And so you felt like the Lord was continually speaking to you throughout this whole process.
Here's some more tools. Here's some more tools. You ask me? Here, try this out. It wasn't guaranteed. I still had to be brave. Uh-huh. I leapt into some of these paintings in faith. I said, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I did. To paint these rings, I was walking around the house doing this. I was doing like this. And Gail said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm like in the movie Karate Kid. Wipe on, wipe off. I'm just practicing. I'm practicing." And so I told her, "I'm painting." And she says, "No, you're not painting." And I said, "Yes, I am. I know I need to do this, to paint the rings of Saturn, and I'm just getting ready for it." And what I did to paint these rings, they're not the way I want them, but they're the way they are, and they're good enough. I have a very large paintbrush that I got and used to paint this big 5 by 8 foot earth. I haven't used it very much. For one thing, it's so big, and I just had a special place in my studio. For one thing, it was tinted blue, and I thought that's from Earth, and I didn't want to mess with that. But I thought, David, it's not a relic. It's just a paintbrush. Use it. Mm-hmm. And so to paint these rings with all these supposedly parallel stripes at an angle with ellipses, not circles, but with ellipses, I didn't paint the canvas, I painted the brush. I took this wide brush and I loaded it with different colors of paint. I just loaded it with that. And then boldly, I just put it on. And it came out of the paintbrush in stripes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And then they were in the wrong place. So I just said, all right, coax them into a better place. And so I just pushed it back and forth, and it got better, it got worse, and then I handle the worst places, pull them back to better, and it just was working. And I was having a good time. I knew I was crazy. I knew I was risking a lot because I didn't have much time left. This was the last painting I had finished. I thought, I got to get this done. I can't mess with this and tinker with it for weeks. I just don't have that time. So I just boldly did it, and it just happened. And God gave that to me. I was painting in the Spirit, a lot of this. And here's another little thing about this particular painting. One thing I love about oil is the rich black I can get. My favorite black is ivory black. Happens to be one of the slowest drying colors. And I thought, David, well, I didn't even have some of the other blacks. I thought, all right, it'll work out. So I put black on, and it just wouldn't dry. And it was a cold season those days in March. But one day, towards the end, the sun came out, and I hauled this painting, wet paint, out, and I put it in the sun, and black and sun really get along well together. And so this painting finally dried. So I could finish some of the things that were waiting, including the stars. But the show was just like 3 days away. And I had just painted the stars and said, come on, stars, dry. And they did mostly. But some of them weren't quite dry. But it was time to varnish the painting. And so that's I have ruined paintings with varnishing them because the varnish can dissolve paint if it's not dry. So I had this huge painting flat out on the table, and I poured the varnish on it, and I started spreading it out, and I thought, it's working, none of the paint is moving. But some of the stars started moving. David, stop! No! You got to spread the varnish. David, stop! No! Got to spread the varnish. So be very careful, be careful. And there are 3 or 4 places where the star exploded. And I thought, perfect! That's what stars do sometimes. So, anybody out there who will be varnishing this painting, restoring it some years from now, the star might come off because it's in the varnish, not in the paint.
So, science fiction and space, this was something that was inside of you for a long time from an early age, mm-hmm. and that God eventually used in you to bring this about. I mean, this is an amazing thing where He gives us the desires. As an artist, you can't help but express what it is that's inside of you, what you're passionate about, what you love, and then God comes along and does something like this. I find that just absolutely wonderful.
Well, I'm really grateful. I can't even begin to express how grateful I am for this opportunity to jump into this gallery of paintings a little bit, to talk about them a little bit, and to talk about you a little bit, you who might be seeing this. That this video is even existing is, I think, for me, a part of my confidence that God is doing something. Obviously, with these planets, God has been doing something for a long, long time. That's self-evident in some ways. But one thing I love about the vastness of time and space is God uses little pieces all the time. And we are a part of this little piece, even as I'm talking to you over time through this machinery. It's still real. I'm really a person talking to you about these paintings of planets that are really planets with all of their majesty. So each one of us has a majesty that God has put on us from before we were born. And I'm hoping, and I'm seeing evidence that these paintings of these planets stirs up and calls forth some of that majesty in each one of us. We are not nothing. We are precious in the eyes of God. And He's saying, people, look at this. I made you for right now to do some things. Be sure you're doing them. God gives us so much to work with. Voices, machines, eyes, ears, and hands and legs and arms and all this stuff. He wants each one of us to be creative in His image and go and do marvelous things in His name. This show is maybe my best shot at doing that in my whole life. I've had this sense of completion from this show. I'm not done. I don't want to quit. But I feel I've had an opportunity to say something that God gave me to say. Each one of us has that. These planets are singing about Him. I've heard audios taken of the sounds of the planets. They're making noise that our ears can't hear, but they are singing. Visually, they're up to so much. This is just these images are just a fragment, a tiny fragment of what is going on all the time. So I'm trying to reach you with that. My friends here taping this are trying to help me reach you with this. But the bigger point is God is trying to reach you through this. God will use anything and everything to reach us. He is so patient. He is so gentle, so merciful. And the heavens declare His glory, and this show declares the glory of the heavens. Behind us is our home planet, Earth. The one that you might be seeing is the biggest painting I've ever painted. Maybe it's the biggest painting I will ever paint. It's impractical, but it has a power that comes from its 5-foot by 8-foot dimension that the smaller ones don't have. People just get it. And the thing is, it's right beneath me, the same planet. It's so big I can't even see it anymore as a planet. However, if you get up on a high mountain or up in an airplane, you can begin to get a sense for it as a planet. If you look at a globe, if you look at a map, if you travel, you can begin to get a sense for Earth as a planet. It just makes it more beautiful, more wonderful. One thing that I love about pictures from space of Earth is you don't see boundaries, you don't see strife, you don't see war, you just see majestic beauty of God's creation. And if we can humble ourselves and walk in that, we can count ourselves as brothers and sisters, not enemies. And I know there's difficulties. I have them in my own life. But there is a way out, and it's right in front of us. God set before us life and death. He says, choose life. And I'm trying to put these out to help me choose life and to encourage others to choose life. Just the beauty that is around us brings us peace, brings us encouragement, helps us struggle through everyday difficulties and have hope and faith that we have a God who loves us. We have a God who gave us a marvelous place to live together and to have dominion over, not in a cruel and ruthless, self-centered way, but in a unified, collective way where peace and order and feasting and rejoicing can take place. What a stage, what a theater for the drama of life. And I'm declaring my sense of humble honor in living here with you. And I hope whenever you watch this, if you watch this, you can go out from where you are and look around and find beauty in the people, in the trees, in the creation, in the night sky, and just relax into the love of God, who's always been there, who always will be there, waiting for us. I pray this, even retrofit this as a prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hi YouTube, hey, it's Matthew Spencer. I'm here with my friend Dwayne and my new friend, David Newton.
Hello.
Who is the artist of this gallery. He actually, the exhibit here, he's created all these amazing paintings. And I just wanted to tell you a quick story. So last week actually, I wanted to come up and see the UNC Jazz Festival here at the Union Colony Civic Center. And I got my dates crossed.